devastating consequences of the Chinese coronavirus catastrophe continues in terms of lives lost and severe economic contraction, which, given who it's affecting and to what extent, i.e. the West, has all the hallmarks of being a bioweapon that has in large part been engineered to target Western population groups to a greater extent, but which through negligence prematurely leaked out of the Wuhan biolab and then proceeded to go on the rampage across the world, aided by infected Chinese travellers allowed to travel internationally, all whilst domestic flights out of Wuhan were suspended. UK Corona Catastrophe Trend Analysis. Britain's half-witted response to the coronavirus pandemic continues to unfold catastrophically, with bringing the pandemic under control virtually wholly left to the good sense of the general public to achieve, as government ministers, MPs, advisors failed to follow that which they've been preaching since the government ordered a lockdown on the 23rd of March, which was a good 3 weeks too late. They do not practice that which they preach, which effectively means that Britain's lockdown is largely over, as the general public have been played for mugs, as illustrated by Dominic Cummings, the Rasputin character at the heart of Boris Johnson's government, who at the height of the pandemic panic during late March went on a 600-mile round trip across the UK whilst infected, spewing viral particles all over the place, and especially in and around Durham, which included visiting a local beauty spot, Bernard Castle, for his wife's birthday, all whilst infected. No self-isolating for 14 days for this selfish little. Furthermore, now that he has been exposed for breaking the rules, Boris Johnson's yes men cabinet has been busy explaining why Cummings was justified in breaking the lockdown rules. So Cummings, instead of being sacked for effectively breaking the lockdown law, the politicians instead have done what they are good at, which is using mealy mouth excuses to subvert the truth. Therefore, Britain's lockdown is largely over, because if the double standards of the Tory government, who never followed that which they ordered others to do, where Britain's official death toll is concerned, it now exceeds 37,000. It's only a couple of months ago that the mad scientists advising the government were warning to expect up to 20,000 deaths if the people of Britain did not follow the lockdown rules, which they in large part have done, with only the Tory government MPs, ministers and their advisors breaking the lockdown rules. So Britain's response to the pandemic has been catastrophic, even on the official government data. Though, as the ONS keeps reminding us every Tuesday, the real Covid-19 death toll is far higher than the official data, about 50% higher. So actual UK extra deaths right now are about 65,000, which includes Scotland and Northern Ireland. To further illustrate just how incompetent and negligent Boris Johnson's response to the crisis has been, is to look at the World League table of deaths that has Britain only number 2 to the United States, which has about 6 times the population. Meanwhile, Pretty Polly Patel is announcing that anyone entering the UK from the 8th of June will need to self-isolate, ignorant of the fact that it is the people of the UK who need to be quarantined when leaving and infecting the rest of Europe. Maybe if the morons in charge had quarantined infected Chinese in January and February when they landed in their hundreds, spewing viral particles all over the place, then Britain would not be in its current coronavirus crisis. It gets worse. The NHS, in all of its wisdom, discharged infected elderly patients to the care homes to make space during February and March and into April, who then went on to trigger outbreaks across Britain's care homes, with the same idiots now promising to investigate why there have been so many deaths in Britain's care homes. Remember that when you clap on for the NHS every Thursday. It's as though there is a cunning evil mastermind, a Bond-esque villain who has been successful in every action to both spread the virus and cripples Britain's economy. Trend analysis. A better picture of the current state of the UK pandemic can be gleaned from the daily deaths chart coupled with the moving averages. The daily trend is definitely downwards on the weekly basis, as illustrated by the 7-day average, currently standing at 251, down from a peak of 1116, whilst the 14-day moving average stands at 305, down from a peak of 959. In technical terms, as long as the 7-day moving average remains below the 14-day average, then the pandemic is reducing, and thus the UK should be okay to start relaxing the lockdown rules soon, perhaps by mid-June, if the 7-day average dips below 100, which will be useful timing because the government has lost a lot of its authority in ordering lockdowns following revelations that those in charge failing to follow their own rules. Nevertheless, the hot sun means that the viral particles are soon broken down by heat and UV rays, so the reducing deaths trend should continue during June at least. Though, if this were a stock chart, then that pattern looks corrective, which means we need to brace ourselves for a second peak and more lockdowns later in the year as the sun starts to go down and people become more relaxed about the social distancing. We may not pass the 3,713 daily deaths per peak, but it's definitely going to surge above 1,000 deaths per day. Let's see if a vaccine appears during September to help prevent that second peak. So how does the city of Sheffield compare in terms of the carnage underway across Britain? In total, Sheffield has suffered 390 deaths in all settings. That's against 2,551 confirmed cases. That results in a case fatality rate of 15%. Though of course, most cases, perhaps 10 times that number, have gone untested and thus unrecorded. So a better measure is the number of deaths per 100,000 population, which for Sheffield is 72. Now compare this to other major UK cities and we see Sheffield isn't faring as badly as several other UK cities are, especially Derby, which to me looks like the medics have just given up and decided to go home. Still, 390 deaths for Sheffield is an horrific number, for if the government had been competent in its handling of the pandemic, then the UK in total would have experienced less than 100 Covid-19 deaths, instead of the current tally of 65,000 deaths in all settings. 390 deaths for Sheffield is far higher than where I imagine Sheffield would be. For instance, my video of late March concluded in expectations for 160 deaths by the end of April. The bottom line is that this pandemic is not over and the government continues to show us just how incompetent they have been at handling the pandemic. So now is definitely not the time to let one's guard down and get infected.